The summer of 1940 marked the peak of Nazi triumph. In less than a year, Hitler's armies had conquered nearly all of Europe. France had fallen. The Low Countries were gone. Norway, Denmark, and Poland had been devoured by blitzkrieg. Across the Channel, the Swastika flew from Calais to Cherbourg. Europe was silent, except for the island that still refused to bow. To the world, it seemed inevitable. Britain would fall next. German soldiers drilled on French beaches, gazing across the narrow waters to the cliffs of Dover. In Berlin, Hitler smiled for the cameras. His generals celebrated the fastest conquest in modern history. And yet, in that victory, he saw a single obstacle, a defiant, stubborn island that mocked his destiny. For Churchill, the task was survival. Britain's army was bloodied and disarmed, its coasts bare, its people weary. But the nation's heart had hardened. From Buckingham Palace to the smallest village, the British prepared for invasion. They built barricades, strung barbed wire along beaches, and trained with wooden rifles. The phrase, "We shall never surrender," became a promise whispered in every shelter. The world held its breath. Hitler had conquered Europe. Now he meant to conquer the sea. In July 1940, Hitler issued Directive Number 16, Operation Sea Lion. It was his boldest gamble yet, the invasion of Great Britain. The objective was clear: crush the island, destroy its armies, and force Churchill to the negotiating table. But the plan was built on arrogance. Hitler had never fought a naval war. He believed Britain would crumble as easily as France. His generals knew better. The blueprint was staggering: 160,000 soldiers, 4,000 transport barges, and 2,000 aircraft to cross the Channel under cover of night. The invasion would unfold in phases: landings on the southern beaches of Kent and Sussex, followed by an armored push toward London. The Germans called it the greatest amphibious operation in history. But behind the grand design, reality told a darker story. The barges were river vessels, too slow and unstable for open water. The weather was unpredictable. The Royal Navy still ruled the seas. And most dangerous of all, the Royal Air Force stood between Hitler and the Channel. Still, Hitler dreamed of victory parades in London. He ordered maps drawn of Trafalgar Square and Buckingham Palace. In his mind, it was already over. In truth, the invasion had not even begun. Across the Channel, Britain was preparing for the impossible. The evacuation from Dunkirk had saved its army, but not its weapons. Thousands of rifles, tanks, and guns now lay rusting on French soil. If the Germans landed, the defense of Britain would rest on a few hastily armed soldiers, farmers, and volunteers. Churchill knew the odds and refused to yield. He walked the ruins of bombed cities, shaking hands with soot-covered workers. His speeches turned despair into defiance. "We shall fight on the beaches," he declared. "We shall never surrender." The words became Britain's shield. Behind the scenes, secret committees planned for invasion. Coastal towns were fortified, roads were mined, bridges wired with explosives. The Home Guard drilled daily, many with only hunting rifles or broomsticks. Farmers turned fields into obstacles for enemy tanks. In pubs and schools, posters read, "You can always take one with you." Even the royal family refused to flee. King George VI and Queen Elizabeth stayed in London during the raids, sharing the danger of their people. The message was clear. This was not just a war for territory, but for survival itself. By August 1940, Hitler's generals had completed the first detailed invasion plan. It was precise, ambitious, and nearly impossible. Phase 1. The Luftwaffe would destroy the Royal Air Force and achieve air superiority. Phase 2. Paratroopers and airborne troops would seize key bridges and ports. Phase 3. The Wehrmacht would land along a 200-mile stretch of southern England. Once the beaches were secure, London would fall within 2 weeks. But even as the maps were drawn, cracks appeared in the plan. The German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, warned that it was suicidal. Britain's fleet outnumbered Germany's by more than 4-1. The Channel's tides were unpredictable, its weather treacherous. Admiral Raeder begged for delay. Hitler refused. He believed the British would surrender before the first soldier even landed. Factories in occupied Europe worked day and night, converting river barges into invasion transports. Wooden planks replaced steel decks. Machine guns were bolted onto fishing boats. But the illusion of power could not mask the truth. Germany had no means to cross the sea safely. Operation Sea Lion was already drowning, and it hadn't even left port. Everything now depended on one thing: the air. The Luftwaffe, once undefeated, was ordered to destroy the Royal Air Force completely. Only then could the invasion begin. From Calais and Cherbourg, waves of German bombers and fighters roared across the Channel. Their targets: radar stations, airfields, aircraft factories, and fuel depots. The Battle of Britain had begun. The sky became the new front line. Young pilots, many barely 20 years old, scrambled from grass airstrips to meet formations twice their size. Engines screamed. Tracer rounds tore the air. Every hour men fought, fell, and vanished into smoke. It was the first major campaign in history fought entirely in the air, and the fate of the world depended on its outcome. Churchill watched from the war rooms, exhausted but unbroken. He knew that if the RAF fell, Britain would fall with it. But radar, the secret weapon, gave the defenders an edge. British controllers could track incoming raids and direct squadrons with deadly precision. The hunters became the hunted. As August ended, one truth became clear. Before Hitler could cross the sea, he would have to conquer the sky. And that battle, at last, he could not control. The summer sky over Britain became a stage for titans. 2 empires faced each other, one ruled by tyranny, the other by defiance. The eagle of Germany sought to strike the lion of Britain from the air. It was not merely a battle of machines, but of will. In Berlin, Hitler issued orders with manic confidence. Once their air force is destroyed, he told his generals, the English will beg for peace. He envisioned London under swastikas, Churchill in chains. But on the other side of the Channel, the Prime Minister's words burned like fire. If the British Empire lasts 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour. Every dogfight became a duel between ideologies, freedom and fear. German pilots trained in victory now faced a nation that refused to die. British aces like Douglas Bader and Sailor Mallon became household names. In the pubs of Kent and Sussex, farmers toasted the few who fought above their fields. Day after day, the Luftwaffe attacked, but the RAF endured. Churchill's gamble, to trust the courage of youth over the might of empire, was working. The eagle was bleeding. The lion was roaring. While the air war raged, Hitler's invasion fleet waited in French harbors. Rows of barges filled the docks of Calais, Boulogne, and Le Havre. Thousands of makeshift vessels designed to carry tanks, horses, and soldiers across the Channel. But the illusion of power hid a fatal flaw. These were river barges, never meant for open sea. German sailors whispered of disaster. The Channel's tides were brutal, its weather treacherous. Even if the RAF fell, the Royal Navy still ruled the waters. Hundreds of destroyers, cruisers, and battleships ready to cut the invasion apart before it reached land. Admiral Raeder warned, "It is suicide. We cannot protect them." Still, the preparations continued. Training camps across France rehearsed mock landings. Posters in Berlin declared, "England will fall." But in secret, officers feared the truth. The invasion was a fantasy born of arrogance, a political dream built on the bones of soldiers who would never make it ashore. By September, the fleet remained motionless. Barges rusted. The tides shifted. The invasion that was supposed to end an empire was already sinking beneath its own weight. On the other side of the Channel, Britain transformed into a fortress. Every field, beach, and village became part of the front line. Children were evacuated inland, while their parents dug trenches and built shelters. The Home Guard, men too old or too young for the army, trained with wooden rifles, determined to fight when the time came. Across the countryside, signs were stripped to confuse enemy paratroopers. Bridges were mined, roads blocked by steel spikes and concrete blocks. From Dover to Cornwall, machine gun nests sprouted among the dunes. Even London prepared for street-to-street warfare. Plans were drawn to fight block by block if the Germans landed. But beyond the fear, there was unity. Farmers donated land for airfields. Women joined the auxiliary corps and the land army. Posters read, "Your courage, your cheerfulness, your resolution will bring us victory." It wasn't just a slogan. It was survival made sacred. While Hitler's troops drilled and occupied France, Britain's civilians became soldiers of endurance. An invasion might come, but it would never come quietly. By early September, the truth was undeniable. The Luftwaffe had failed to break the RAF. German bombers were falling faster than they could be replaced. Factories in Britain still worked. Radar stations still stood. And every day, Churchill's speeches strengthened the nation's resolve. Inside Hitler's headquarters at the Wolf's Lair, frustration turned to fury. Reports from Goering were vague and exaggerated. He had promised victory in 2 weeks. Now the campaign dragged into its 3rd month. Rain lashed the French coast. The invasion barges sat idle. Every delay made the Channel colder, the tides rougher, and the British stronger. Hitler postponed the invasion, first by a week, then another. He still believed Britain might surrender without invasion, that Churchill's pride would bend under the Blitz. But Churchill had no intention of bending. He told his cabinet, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning." Operation Sea Lion slipped quietly into uncertainty. The dream of conquest was beginning to drown. On September 7th, 1940, the skies over London turned to fire. When the Luftwaffe failed to destroy the RAF, Hitler changed tactics. If he couldn't conquer Britain's air force, he would crush its spirit. Wave after wave of bombers roared over the city. Warehouses along the Thames exploded. The East End burned through the night, a storm of flame that could be seen for miles. Firemen battled infernos with bare hands, and families huddled in the underground as the earth shook above them. The Blitz had begun. For 57 consecutive nights, German bombers pounded London and other cities, Coventry, Liverpool, Portsmouth. Churchill visited the ruins at dawn, his face streaked with soot. He spoke softly to survivors, We can take it. And Britain did. The bombing united the nation more than it broke it. The fires of London did not signal defeat. They marked the birth of defiance. While Hitler sought to terrorize, he forged something stronger, the unyielding courage of a people who refused to fall. Autumn arrived, and with it, the death of Hitler's dream. The English Channel, once calm and blue in the summer sun, turned gray and violent. Winds tore across the coast. Waves smashed against the harbors where barges waited like stranded beasts. Many capsized before they ever left port. Others broke apart in rehearsal. Nature itself seemed to have chosen a side. Admiral Raeder reported the truth. The channel is no longer navigable for invasion. The Kriegsmarine had already lost much of its fleet in Norway. What remained could never protect 160,000 men from the Royal Navy's wrath. Every plan, every calculation collapsed under the weight of reality. In London, Churchill received the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The invasion, he knew, was no longer coming. Not this year. Perhaps never. But he gave no orders to relax. The fortifications continued, the drills repeated. We must not mistake reprieve for victory, he warned. They will come again, when we least expect it. But they never did. The sea had turned against the conqueror. Operation Sea Lion was dead, swallowed by the very waters it sought to cross. With the invasion postponed, Hitler's attention shifted. His pride demanded a new enemy, one greater than the island he could not conquer. He turned east, toward the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. But the decision to abandon Sea Lion would mark the turning point of the entire war. In his obsession with destroying Britain, Hitler had squandered time, men, and machines. The Luftwaffe was exhausted, its ranks decimated. Thousands of pilots were dead or captured. Factories struggled to keep up with losses, and morale in the Reich began to waver. Meanwhile, Britain had survived, bloodied, but alive. For Churchill, this was more than survival. It was proof that tyranny could be resisted. He knew the war was far from over, but the myth of Nazi invincibility was broken. Messages poured in from occupied nations, whispers of hope carried across Europe by secret radio. The world had seen the impossible, an island standing against an empire. And in that defiance, history began to change course. By winter 1940, Hitler could no longer hide the truth from his generals. Operation Sea Lion was a failure, not on the battlefield, but in the mind of its creator. He had believed that sheer will could conquer geography. But the Channel was more powerful than his ambition. In the Führer's headquarters, frustration turned to fury. He blamed Göring for the Luftwaffe's failure, Raeder for his caution, the weather for its treachery. But deep down, he knew the truth. Britain had beaten him without landing a single soldier. For a man who saw himself as invincible, it was unbearable. Churchill, by contrast, grew stronger. His speeches echoed from Parliament to the front lines, uniting the empire in purpose. The United States watched closely. The legend of British resistance, forged during the Battle of Britain, now inspired support across the Atlantic. The first shipments of food, weapons, and planes began to arrive under Lend-Lease. Hitler had not only lost his chance to invade England, he had awakened the world against him. The war had entered a new phase, one the Reich would never truly control again. Operation Sea Lion became a ghost, a plan studied, debated, and feared, yet never realized. Historians would later call it the greatest invasion that never happened. For the British people, it became a symbol of endurance, proof that unity could defeat even the most terrifying enemy. For the Germans, it was a reminder of the limits of power. Had the invasion gone forward, the cost would have been unimaginable. Tens of thousands would have died in the surf of the Channel. Cities would have burned and history might have ended differently. But it didn't, because one nation refused to yield. Even Hitler's closest advisors quietly admitted that Sea Lion was doomed from the start. The army lacked landing craft. The navy lacked dominance. The weather turned against them. It was a plan born of arrogance and sustained by illusion. And when illusion met reality, the sea, cold, gray, eternal, had the final word. The invasion that never came became legend, and a warning for all who follow ambition into madness. When the war finally ended, Operation Sea Lion faded into the background of history, a failed dream buried beneath the waves. But its legacy lived on, not in victory or defeat, but in what it revealed about courage, resilience, and fate. Britain's survival in 1940 was not inevitable. It was earned by farmers who stood guard in fields, by pilots who fought until their engines failed, by mothers who soothed their children as bombs fell above. It was the triumph of spirit over steel. For Hitler, Sea Lion became the first fracture in his empire, the moment when destiny slipped from his grasp. For Churchill, it was the moment Britain proved worthy of its history. From that narrow strip of sea, the course of the world changed. Today, the waves still crash against the white cliffs of Dover, calm and quiet. But beneath them lie the ghosts of an invasion that never came, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that never need to be fought.